Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Morrison. Today, I will be talking about cutting through the illusions of AI, practical use cases for design. Before we get started, let's talk about vibe coding. I assume that at least some of you have heard about this new phenomenon, these sites where you can quickly generate a website from scratch with just a prompt. A fellow UX design professional did a survey, kind of getting a sense about how the industry is feeling about this. As you can see, there's a lot of negativity around it, a lot of people who feel meh, and then a smaller percentage who feel positive. That's an interesting survey to check out. I recommend reading their article. However, I wanted to start with this because I felt like it was a really good reflection of my own experience with vibe coding, and that while I am an advocate for it and I see a lot of potential, I've also had a lot of experiences that definitely don't live up to the hype. So in this call and session, I want to dig into where I actually have seen it add value and kind of filter out some of the hype. Um, Based off of kind of tangible, concrete use cases. So what we'll cover today is basically I'm going to cover 3 examples of my experience using AI, both unsuccessfully and successfully within design. So I'm going to cover how I used AI to create a customer journey map, and I kind of consider that a failure, didn't work out for me. Using AI to review and critique designs for usability and accessibility. I consider this a successful use case. And then AI is an ideation partner to come up with multiple versions of a solution. Thinking of how can I alter a design to fit different screen sizes? How can I alter input types? Playing around with different ways to let users interact with a piece of content, getting support, generating visual assets or content during testing, cases like that. So let's dive in. A bit about me. I am the UX manager at Energy Saving Trust currently, where I lead research and design. I conduct prototyping and testing, internal design, and educational workshops. My session today is a reflection of my own personal experimentation and not necessarily a reflection of my current role or previous roles, just to call that out. My specialty within design and research, though, has been around designing for information focused on energy, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies. Given that, the main idea that I wrestle with on a regular basis is how do you make something that's abstract and complicated, very concrete and easy for anyone to understand? Previously, I did a talk around my experiments trying 20 plus different AI design tools. You can see a list of those tools in my rating. These are already quickly becoming out of date as the landscape is shifting quite quickly in terms of what tools can do what. That still might be worth checking out. So my goal with this call, and my goal in general when I experiment with AI, is to learn how to rein it in so that it is something immediately useful, fits within my workflow, and fits within my constraints. I'm rarely starting from ground zero, come up with a design from scratch. Usually there's already an environment I'm working within, there's a brand that I have to fit the designs within, existing infrastructure in place. So where generative AI tends to shine is, again, when you have zero constraints. So let's look at some use cases within the actual reality of working on design where that might fit. Before we get started, I want to call out this idea that the devil is in the details. This is really important for AI because it brings into play how can you effectively check AI's work. If the accuracy or inaccuracy is not immediately evident. It's something you kind of have to dig for. Looking at that and thinking of that, let's examine when you make something by hand versus when you generate something using AI. If I make it myself, I have greater control and I know the thought process and intention and reasoning behind each decision or the lack of reasoning. With AI, there is no reasoning or logic. So I then have to go through each decision that it makes and pull out, okay, it put a contact form on this page. Was that a good decision or a bad decision? Does it make sense? Um, Basically, you're spending most of your time playing detective, sorting through and going through whatever it gives you that looks maybe very polished and refined, but checking if it actually solves the problem. And again, it's often kind of hard to determine that. You have to go quite deep, as it's easy to miss those details and nuances that set apart something that looks like it solves a problem but actually doesn't. So I'm going to start reviewing one thing that I found AI can't do, at least from my own experiences. From my own experience, AI is not well suited to creating a final, polished version of a artifact or piece of work. This comes from one example that I have of creating a customer journey map. I know some individuals will use AI to kind of actually generate the content, but in this use case, I had done the research already and I documented it in Miro using different sticky notes. So I had the story I wanted to tell and those insights that I kind of thought through and pieced together already in place. I just wanted to put this together into a more polished format so it would be easy for other stakeholders to review and look at. So I thought this might be a good way to test AI. Can it take what I've given it and just kind of clean it up for me? If so, that would be really valuable. So I gave it a prompt. It's not the world's best prompt. I wouldn't claim that by any means. But what I got out was pretty more polished looking than what I started with. It looked nice. It was easy to scan. So then what I did and what I found valuable when interacting with AI tools is I approached it like I would be grading a piece of student's work or an intern's design that they presented to me. I went through and I annotated line by line, section by section, each decision that the AI made in putting that design together and reflecting, did it accurately match what I gave it? Is it better? Did it improve? I found that, again, I did a very rough check, and 5 out of 10 of the things that I found just through my first pass were correct. I found if you'll look what I gave it, there were 4 phases or steps, and you'll notice it reduced it to 3, which significantly alters not just that, but all of the content nested within each of those phases and changes the story that I was trying to tell based off of that research and insights. So that was already a big shift that fundamentally from the start kind of set the tone. And what I found was there are lots of nuances like that as well, where it was now easier to scan. It looked more visually appealing. Most of the content I gave it was there, but it had also added things. It had removed a few essential data points that were part of, again, that narrative that needed to be communicated. And in the end, after playing around with this for a while, I decided it would be faster to rebuild it myself from scratch. Either I ended up using Figma, but sometimes I'll recreate these in Miro because the time it would have taken to build in those constraints into the prompt to get it to match exactly what I gave it would have been too time consuming. So that brings up the question, whatever task you're doing, you need to ask yourself, is it going to be faster to correct AI's errors or do it yourself? You might not know that until you actually test out using AI. And it depends on the scope of the task. For some things, I find the speed that AI gives me outweighs the lack of accuracy in that I'm able to quickly check and correct its work. And I'm going to give you two examples of that now. The previous example, obviously, that wasn't the case. It quickly did my task, but the lack of accuracy was too time consuming to fix. So what are two things AI can do well? Usability reviews and accessibility reviews at a very high level. For this use case, you would provide a URL or screenshot of a site and ask whatever AI tool of choice you're using to review it. It's then going to list what it finds that does or doesn't work, and then you're going to go through that list it gives you and check. Do you agree, disagree with that statement? If so, why or why not? So you're still in the driver's seat in terms of reasoning and evaluating that list of criteria it gives you, but it gives you something to start with. So an example of this is I gave it a website contact form and I asked it to review the site for usability and accessibility. It did not give me a comprehensive list of all the usability issues necessarily, but it was a really useful starting point. This is a hypothetical task, I should add. But it was also really nice because in this case, it's really fast for me to go through and check if I agree, disagree with the different statements. For example, it said that the page had clear contact information. That was really quick for me to check. Yes, that was indeed the case. Areas for improvement, it called out navigation simplicity. I needed a more clear visual hierarchy. This was actually something I disagreed with. So even though I disagreed with the output it gave me, this format works well and that it's easy for me to evaluate the output. It's very fast. Another good use case for AI is getting it to generate alternative solutions. And this is really what it's built for, is generating from scratch ideas. Ideation, perfect sweet spot to use it. In this case, you'll define the problem. I would recommend drafting a solution or giving it an example to start from, and then you're going to ask it to create alternatives or maybe visually articulate your solution that you've described using words. And then you're going to review what it gives you line by line and evaluate, okay, is this a good direction to go down? Do we want to explore this option further? An example of this is, again, I gave it a random page contact form, and I asked it to come up with 3 alternative designs to make this form more mobile friendly. So very specific use case. But I didn't just want it to describe it to me. The tool that I used, I believe in this case, was either Lovable or Versal. I can't remember which one, but they all work quite similarly. And what it did is it gave me 3 different options of how this form could look and maybe be improved if you're on a mobile device. The first one was a progressive form. So again, you have a small screen, so it's only showing you chunks of information at a time. The second one was card-based, again, kind of chunking up the information. And the last one was a conversational form. So I could look at this and I could say, okay, based off of the needs of our audiences, I think that progressive form is going to work well. In my case, I was curious, okay, the conversational form, what would that interaction look like? Would that actually be faster than filling out a form? I was able to test that. So I'm able to ask it to make it interactive, and I could test asking a few questions and kind of seeing what that flow or pattern would look like. Again, a really nice way for me to quickly experience a possible solution early on, whereas before this would have taken me a very long time to draft and prototype in Figma. This also lets me quickly share ideas with stakeholders. You can also test this with users. Any task that you have really early in the design process where you're not looking for the finished piece, but you're wanting to explore, okay, what if we approached it this way and get feedback from people? Really excellent time and place to use AI. The last really practical use case is I will upload screenshots of different pieces of UI that I'm working on and ask it to come up with alternatives. I took a screenshot of just users entering their postcode. How could we make this easier? And I asked it to come up with alternatives. It gave me three different options, just highlighting two here. One was an interactive map, and you'll see it called out what this type of pattern is best for. Delivery or logistic apps, location-based services, new development or rural areas where maybe you're not using a postcode. Versus the third option it gave me was more of a traditional postcode entry pattern, and it kind of calls out what that's best for. So quickly I'm able to kind of evaluate, okay, maybe if I'm wanting users to see where they are on a map, their postcode is in relation to another one, I might go with this interactive map. But if I'm just wanting them to enter their address because it's a required field for a form, then maybe I would go with the third option. Those are the two main use cases that I found worked well, but I want to just call out a few more to wrap up here. I use AI regularly to recreate websites or PDFs in Figma. Often I might be working with a client or working on a project, and I might need to edit a part of an existing screen of a website. And I would then need to recreate that entire screen in Figma just to kind of simulate what that could look like. So this is a really good way to speed up my process so that I can focus just on the part that I need to redesign versus recreating everything else. I also found it really good to adjust designs that I've created for different screen sizes. Again, kind of what I just showed you. How would I redesign this for mobile? What would that look like? And then lastly, it's also really useful early on in the design process for creating placeholder visuals or placeholder content before you finalize that, but you kind of need something to simulate the interface so that it looks real. That's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions or want to talk about this more, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always keen to discuss this and see how other people are using AI tools. I also kind of blog regularly on there and discuss my experiences experimenting with these different techniques. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.